As Gamergate's unofficial historian, I suppose that it falls to me to speak on the demise, far too late, of Feminist Frequency. Yet, really, Sarkeesian had nothing meaningful to do with Gamergate, even though she will forever be associated with it in the public consciousness. Her involvement with Gamergate really was in creating a fertile ground for something like that to happen, and for establishing the bedroom feminist grift, doubtless drawing on her experience previously as a seminar scam sales spokesperson. She's been lionized in eulogies for the demise of Feminist Frequency in a great deal of games media at this point, and it's worth taking note of how peculiar that is. Sarkeesian was a moral entrepreneur. Feminist Frequency was a business for extracting money with menaces. She was essentially a moral extortionist, a busybody, and she's not the first. We are replete in history with people who do this sort of thing, whether it be Frederick Wortham, Pat Pulling, Jack Thompson, Tipper Gore, just to show that it's not all on one side of the political aisle, and so on. What separates people like Sarkeesian from actual critics is the way in which they alchemically transmute their personal distaste for something into a societal problem. Thompson couldn't just not like violent video games. He had to say that they were murder simulators, that they were driving kids over the edge in some way, all without evidence, of course. Tipper Gore couldn't, for example, say, pressure her husband into doing the difficult task of increasing social investment, welfare safety nets, and so on. It was far easier to just blame rap and metal music for violence and to seek to censor or at least label it. Similarly, Sarkeesian couldn't just say, I don't like these games. They had to be the source of misogyny, hatred, sexism, violence against women, and so on. And so she had to not just criticize them, but crusade to have them changed. So yeah, that's what separates them from criticism. That's why they get such backlash. They want to turn their personal taste into everybody else's problem. The analysis that Sarkeesian made was just as spurious as that of Wortham, Pulling, Thompson, Gore, etc. She was just as much of an outsider to what she was criticizing, and she got just as much valid criticism in return. So why did anyone take her seriously? I mean, what she got away with was absurd. She was consulted by games companies. She ended up going before the UN to testify about online harassment. Yeah. Insert the just turn the machine off tweet quote here. To underline the absurdity of this, imagine Ice-T consulting with Tipper Gore about lyrics on his album, or Jack Thompson being brought in to advise on a new version of Doom. I think that throws into sharp relief just how absurd it was that Sarkeesian was being brought in to advise companies. What's the real difference between her and them? None. But what is the difference about the reception and the seriousness with which she was taken as compared to them? I've had a lot of time to think about this over the past 10 years or so, and it must be ideological. There is a strand of social conservatism on the left just as there is on the right. And I think a lot of companies were afraid of the mob and hadn't yet adjusted to social media, or understanding that a mob of angry people on Twitter was not representative of what was going on outside of Twitter. And the same for YouTube, whose landscape has utterly changed in the last 10 years. There's a lot of people in journalism, particularly niche journalism, who were activists or trust fund babies who were looking to do activism, not journalism. I mean, even before the current crash in advertising rates and everything else, online journalism did not pay very well. Games journalism did not pay very well. So what kind of people could afford to do it? People who had other reasons for doing it than their love of games. A lot of people in gaming as well, in the creation of games, wanted to change the world through their art, and that's something I can at least sympathise with, empathise with. But they made a sort of Faustian pact with Sarkeesian in so doing. There was the ability to reframe criticism as abuse, and to fold it in with the inevitable, genuine online abuse that everyone gets. People are tribal. If you look now at the political situation in the United States, and you wonder how on earth Trump can literally admit to his crimes on tape, and yet still maintains 30% support, remember that Sarkeesian admitted on tape to knowing nothing about games. She also never fulfilled her crowdfunding efforts. She stole art and footage for commercial projects, and she got away with it, just the same as Trump has. Remember that none of the death or bomb threats against her were deemed credible by law enforcement, while those against her critics were considered credible by law enforcement. Remember that feminist critique from those actually knowledgeable about games, like Liana Kersner for example, were ignored. So what is the difference? It bothers me trying to figure it out, and I think the only thing is that it was coming from inside the house, so to speak. From people who felt they were in political alignment and put that tribalism over other concerns. Maybe all of this is coming to an end. Maybe finally, with the death of Feminist Frequency, we can start putting this behind us, but censorship is still happening, as has happened recently with Skullgirls. Still, maybe it's the end, or the beginning of the end. The mass redundancies in sensitivity consultants and DEI officers is hopeful that we might get back to something where the art matters, the creativity matters. But I wouldn't get too excited, because rather than returning to some sort of equilibrium, we have a pendulum swing, and this so-called progressive moral panic lasted way longer than those previous moral panics I mentioned earlier. An effect of social media, perhaps? But now the right wing is back in its familiar groove of moral entrepreneurship and catastrophism. While they won't get the easy ride that Sarkeesian did from the press, people like chuntering wine merchant and Mirror Universe Frodo Ben Shapiro is really no different to Sarkeesian. Nor is voted most likely to be a nonce in the yearbook outrage artist Matt Walsh. In their mendacious, shrieking, censorious approach to pantomime story hour sex education for kids, and their reactions to popular culture, in their screaming about preserving Western culture, they are exactly the same as Sarkeesian, whinging in her ill-informed manner about games she'd never played, or claiming that games cause misogyny and other social ills. There's really no difference between the two. It's all bollocks. But at least the media will be on side when it comes to fighting the right's nonsense. So maybe this next segment won't be quite as bad. Why did Sarkeesian et al. Bother me so much? I'm a creator. I make games. I write books. I create art. Low art, perhaps, but art nonetheless. I want to be free to use every crayon in the box. I don't want someone over my shoulder telling me what I can or can't do. Vote with your feet and your wallet. If you don't like something, don't buy it. Establishing that a piece of art causes harm is an incredibly high bar, or should be. Sarkeesian helped contribute to an atmosphere where many people felt unable to create the things that they wanted to, the things that they desired to make, where people felt constricted. And now we're feeling a lot of the same pressure from the people we're more used to doing that to us. It's got to stop, but it's not going to. It's just the villain's face will change, the problem that they think exists will change, but the rhetoric will stay the same. The lack of evidence will stay the same. Zang. It's been called misogynistic, racist, a hate group, reactionary. It's been blamed for Trump, for keeping women out of games and technology. None of this is true. If you want the real story, then you need to buy Inside Gamergate.